Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real World Productivity Podcast. I'm Adam Moody, and today I'm talking with integrative productivity expert Angela Kristen Taylor. Welcome to the show, Angie.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate you letting me be here with you today.
Definitely, and like a lot of things going on right now, we're remote, so this is, I guess, fitting in the current events, but we're just going to jump right into it. I'm sure we'll touch on this as well, but my first question is really just about you and your background, so everyone can kind of get up to speed about who you are and where you're coming from. So could you tell us just a little bit about yourself, as much or as little as you feel like sharing today?
Sure. Yeah. So I am, like you said, an integrative productivity expert. And, a lot of people ask me, how did you get to be an integrative productivity expert? And what exactly is that? Right. So I can tell you that I have 5 children.
Mm-hmm.
They are yours, mine, and ours. So we are on marriage number 2.
All right.
And I had 2 kids. My husband had 2 kids. We had one together. So we have raised 5 children together. Our youngest is 6 and our next youngest is 17. We have homeschooled these kids. We deal with a lot of different dietary issues, gluten allergies, dairy allergies. I don't eat meat. He does. So we have all that going on.
Oh,
and then I've run a coaching business. I've been coaching for 17 years. And before that, I was in real estate. And I've been real estate as a total in working in the real estate industry for 27 years.
Okay.
So being able to manage all of that, plus having dogs, and we've had all kinds of pets. We had a parrot, fish tanks, all these different things. And, productivity becomes a way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I can tell you that I started off as, right? We have like our natural state and our adjusted state. And my natural state is to be a very chaotic walking disaster.
All right.
And so having to go from that to being a morning person who loves to get up early and has a clean kitchen when I wake up in the morning, and my car is clean and my house is clean, and like all of my clients are taken care of and everything's great. Like that is, I am so sorry. My dog is crazy barking right now.
This adds a little bit of flavor. This is real. Like I said, the title is Real World Productivity. So we got to deal with the dogs. That's the real world.
We totally do. But that's how I got there. So
Okay.
It's really a matter of being able to be productive because you have to, right? Because you have no other choice. And that was where I came from. And then what I realized is that so many other people, especially those who are self-employed, start out in that same place, that walking, chaotic disaster, like I can't seem to get my stuff together, right? And move my business forward and still be able to manage this crazy chaos thing I call life.
Yes.
And I had to do it. And I figured out how. And that's what I do, is I help people connect all the dots in their life and their business and figure out how to make it work, make it work really well.
Yeah. And I like what you mentioned. I'm going to kind of dive down this a little bit of a rabbit hole here maybe, but I was, reading and checking out your website, and I loved something I read, and I can't remember the exact words, but basically you were talking about where you were at one point, and the phrase I believe was the multiplying cereal in the car, Cheerios. That's it. Sorry.
Cheerios.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're like, I'm not going to tell you all about my car, but let's just say there's a lot of Cheerios. And I was like, oh man, that's some really good imagery right there. So, you mentioned this natural state, and apologize if I get the terms wrong, an adjusted state.
Sure.
So I guess, this is interesting to me, and I'm personally really interested in this. So what made you, besides having, chaos in your life and saying, I've got to change things because I'm just not happy, but what was it that led you to saying, hey, maybe if I put some of this productivity type stuff or some frameworks or whatever it is into use, that would help me? And so, what, I guess, led you to that point?
That's a really great question, because for me, I really bucked being an organized, structured person completely, because my mom is just that, like, she had, just to give you an example, okay, she had all of her recipes on index cards and set up on a 3-month rotating schedule. So you did not eat the same thing again for another 3 months, okay?
But you
3 months
were
rotating
to
schedule.
Eat it in 3 months.
Yes, assured. And the entire recipe list was already programmed into her computer into a shopping list by week based on her recipes, and was categorized by aisle that things show up in the store.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I grew up with.
I can understand. Yeah, I could understand some backlash. Then you're gonna try
So
something else.
I was like, oh no, I am not going to be my mother, right?
Hmm.
And so for me, it was really, I was so far in the other direction, but then realizing that, my life was out of control. I grew up in a very clean house, in a very organized house, and things were always very structured from her end. But I was allowed the freedom to kind of do things my way, live my own life. My mom was a hippie in her day. And so for me, it was kind of like she let me be free to be me,
Yeah.
which was great. But I definitely tried to not be her, right? So for me, it really was a matter of trying to marry up. How can I have a clean house and be organized, but do it in a way that's not my mother, right?
No, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think
Yeah.
that leads us down to another one, which I'm really interested in too, because for myself, I know that, the question comes up. Sometimes people say, well, this sounds neat. Sure, being productive is cool. The results I get, but like, I don't want to just be like a robot and just following rules and that's all I do.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so I guess, how do you feel about that? Where like, you still, obviously you feel like the real you is maybe not, living by a framework, but how do you feel, and how do you deal with people who kind of say that, where like, am I just going to be a robot if I'm good at productivity?
Yeah, so I I actually asked myself that question when I first started. And for me, I'm more of that creative. I like my freedom. I value my freedom really highly, pretty much above much of anything else, right? And pretty much anybody who's out there doing their own thing, running their own business, they're going to be that style of person, right?
Hmm.
So, one of the things that I tried to do first was implement my mom's methods, and realized very quickly that just this one's going to work for me because that's not who I am. And so then I thought, well, what do I notice about me? And one of the things that I noticed was that I couldn't sit down and do one thing for any length of time.
Yep.
I needed to do things in really small increments. So I couldn't set aside an entire day to do one thing the way my mother would. But I could certainly set aside 30 minutes to do one thing and then switch gears and go do something else for 15, 20 minutes and then come back to it. That worked.
Hmm.
So I started creating my own rules, and rules that worked for what I felt suited my natural style, right?
Yep.
So, things like, it's funny. It was also a big part of it was being realistic with my time. As a creative, I tend to be a little unrealistic,
Hmm. Yeah, sure. I think everybody
a
does,
little
but
bit.
yeah.
So I went out to Pottery Barn because, we love our tools, right?
Mhm.
So I went out to Pottery Barn and I got this ginormous clipboard. It was like really short, but really wide. And
Mhm.
it had all the days of the week on it. And I was like, this is amazing. And I sat down on Sunday and I filled out every single like column. And I was like, had my whole week planned. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm going to knock this out. I'm going to be so efficient. This is great. And then on Friday, I had finally finished everything that I had put on there for Monday. And and I realized I might have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Finding out
So,
that the to-do list doesn't
yes,
translate into reality. Yeah.
exactly. So the first thing that I did was I'd heard of food journaling where, if you're going to diet, right, you're going to write down what you're eating to see where the problem is, right? So I was like, well, if that works for food, it could totally work with my time. So I started time journaling. So I just started writing down everything that I was doing during the day, how long it took me to do it, when I started, when I finished, that sort of thing. And then I went through and looked at it and realized that I could see on there very specifically where I was wasting time. I could see where I was being inefficient with my time,
Mhm.
like, go to the grocery store 5 times because I wanted to eat what I felt like eating and not necessarily what I had in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
Another one of those freedom creative things, right? And I realized, where things worked and where things didn't. So I used that to create a calendar that felt good for me.
Mhm.
And I had to learn how to like time blocking, because to me, time blocking was like, like when you're all tucked into the sheets and your feet are in there and you
Mhm.
can't get your foot out and you really just want to get your foot out and it feels really claustrophobic. Like that's what time blocking felt like for me. I was like, I can't do that. So I had to get used to the idea. But some of the things that helped me were like, that book, The Happiness Advantage, was a huge help, because it was teaching me about like activation energy, and how if I didn't want to do something, or I did want to do something, but I was kind of like, and I kept pushing it off, it was probably because the energy it was going to take me to get that project started was too much. So then I was like, well, how can I make that energy change, right? And then I was paying attention to things like, there was a website, I don't know if it's still out there, called, it was Fly Mom, or Fly something like that. It was Finally Loving Yourself. Fly Lady. That's what it was called, Fly Lady. And it was this really great Yahoo group that you could join back in the day, that would send you little emails when it was time to do things like change the load of laundry from the washing machine to the dryer. And I was like, that's awesome. So I got involved in looking at that. And that was about creating routines for people who were living in chaos. And she used the acronym, she turned chaos into an acronym as Can't Have Anyone Over Syndrome. And I thought, that's me. That was totally me, right? Cheerio. I couldn't even have anybody in my car because of the Cheerios, right? It wasn't going to happen. So what I realized was there were little routines that I could build into my day that worked for me, like getting dressed instead of staying in my pajamas all day, like making my bed in the morning, and feeling good about the fact that I could walk around my house and it was clean, because I could do something for 15 minutes. Or like when you're in the shower, I could wipe down the walls in the shower while I was in there, and take 2 seconds to do it, instead of, after a month of soap scum buildup, now I'm in there scrubbing with Tilex, it was like not what I wanted to do. Exactly. So it's just finding the places where I could make things easier, so that it wasn't a huge, big deal with all this energy required from me to get things accomplished, and
then for yourself, as well as maybe recommending for other people, because I know that the other half of this equation is routines are really good. I'm a huge fan, even the simple ones, like that's how I ensure I floss my teeth. And some people, it's like, oh, this flossing comes up on the podcast a lot. I've got to make a note of this. It must be me. But anyways, little routines like that. But the other side of this is, how do you make it happen? Like, I'm curious, what do you use to implement? Is it, using some sort of reminders? Do you have a favorite app? Do you use visual cues? Like, what kind of things do you do, or advise people to do?
Yeah. So I think for me, a big part of it was not wanting to live the way I was living anymore. So that was the big driving, motivating force behind it. A digital calendar was the easiest thing for me to use. So it can be iCal, it can be Google Calendar, whatever you happen to have that works with your phone, right? And for me, that was a big thing, because like even with my kids, I would, as an entrepreneur, I tend to work and work and work and work. And, my kids grew up with one more minute, one more minute, one more minute, And my daughter, who's 17 now, one of the things that she would always say is, I want to do something with you. Like at night, she'd be like, hey, you want to play a game, or do you want to watch a movie? And I'd say, yeah, as soon as I finish this. And then I'd finish it and I'd go look, and she was asleep. And I would feel horrible inside. And so I realized that as part of my time blocking, I would put everything on my calendar. And that's a really good tip, because most people are just putting appointments on their calendars. And then what they do is they don't realize that they need to put themselves and their family and all their other stuff on their calendar too, because if it's not on your calendar, it's not going to happen, right? Like we'll just book ourselves, boop, 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 right, on our calendar, and forget about the fact that we actually have to eat lunch, or that, we might want to go spend some time with our family at the end of the day, and we just overbook ourselves. So I put her on my calendar every night at 7:00. She was on my calendar, and I showed her that she was on my calendar, and that made her feel so special and important. And it made me realize that in her mind, she was like the last thing on my list, when in reality, everything that I was doing was for her, right? And for my kids, for my family. They were at the top of my list, but they didn't feel there. And that was because I wasn't spending that time or prioritizing time with them. I was prioritizing work. So putting her on my calendar and then setting those notifications so that 15 minutes before something else was supposed to start, whether that was an appointment for myself with me, right? Like go sit down and read a book for a little bit, you know, or take a break or go spend some time with your kid or whatever, that I had enough notice to kind of segue out of what I was doing, get to a stopping point, and then move forward. And like that was just huge. So digital calendar, time blocking. Don't try to time block until you time journal for a week. So you can see where you're spending your time. You can analyze that. And then you create a time block schedule that'll actually work for you. And then staggering your appointments. So, you know, look for where you fail, right? Don't look for at a failure as like, oh crap, I did it again. I'm a mess. I'll never figure this out and then just give up, you know? Look at a failure as an indication of something that you need to change, right? Yeah. So when we take that and we look and say, okay, well, you know, I noticed that I had this big block of time to do this project and it was going to be 4 hours, but about 2 hours into it, I started feeling drained and the last 2 hours just really weren't that productive and I didn't get much done. And then I was tired afterwards and the rest of my day kind of sucked, right? Well, great. 2 hours, like let's cut that instead of 4 hours, let's make it an hour and a half. And then let's take a half-hour break, and then let's do another hour and a half, and let's see how you do. Yeah. And then you'll notice that like your production shoots through the roof because you gave yourself a chance to ground yourself, to recenter, to boost up your emotions, you know, so that you feel better again and you're ready to dive back into it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do that. And also wanted to circle back to the calendar and putting yourself in. I think that's so important. It's something I learned and I started doing, and I like both me and my wife put our date night on Wednesdays in there. And
absolutely
a good reminder, one for me, because I get busy and I just, you know, I know that it's coming, but that's a reminder, hey, maybe I need to plan something, or, you know, even if we're just watching a movie and sitting on the couch, but also so that people don't book times with me. And you know, because otherwise it probably would happen, or I would get client calls, and this way I don't have to feel bad. I literally have an appointment, you know, and say, sorry, I'm busy, I can't do anything, you know.
Exactly.
Feel like I'm making something up or I'm making an excuse, but it's real. It's on my calendar. So yeah.
Absolutely. One of the tools that I use Acuity to run my calendar, and you know, Acuity, Calendly, OneHub, they're all pretty much the same, right? Depending on what your needs are. But with me, when I set up all my appointment types in Acuity, I put a 30-minute buffer so that it always books that time for the session and then an extra 30 minutes where no one is allowed to book. And what that does is it gives me an opportunity to take that break in between clients, in between sessions, so that I can get up and move around and go grab a snack or run to the bathroom or fill up my water. You know, I can do whatever I need to do. I can check on my kid, you know, and play with him. I can walk my dogs, right? Yeah. So it gives me that break, and it's built in, just like you're saying, right? So there's no question about it. I'm not trying to sandwich appointment to appointment to appointment. I have that natural built-in schedule where it's just automatically doing its thing.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, because I've made that mistake, and one of the biggest ones I made was with recording this podcast. So I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I used to say, well, it's going to take, you know, it generally lasts, you know, 20 to 40 minutes of recording. I like to talk to people before, a little bit after. So yeah, I just need an hour. I didn't think about it, set it up in my booking calendar, and it's 1 hour. And sure enough, in 1 week, I think I had 2 recordings, and then I had client calls booked immediately after, and like it was just chaos. And you know, I got through that and I learned real quick, like, oh yes, that's what the buffer is for.
Exactly. It could be really stressful otherwise.
Yeah. So, and then I'm curious, you know, this is stuff we have, I'm sure, and I know a lot of this is common to people, but what kind of issues do you see as someone who does coaching and training? What kind of common issues do you see people having?
You know, a lot of the issues that I see people having are not realizing how it all connects together. You know, they don't realize where the issues come from, right? So they kind of accept it as like, hey, this is who I am. And they don't see themselves as being able to be anything different, right? And they don't understand where it came from. So like, you know, one of the things that, you know, is really important and really relevant is understanding how, like, where your energy is, you know, how much energy do you have in a day? A lot of people, you know, they start out their day, they wake up, and their first thing is to run to the coffee, right? Run to the coffee pot. I'm going to get some coffee. I'm going to get some caffeine in me, and I'm going to feel better. And then as they go through their day, like, okay, well, I need, you know, a pick me up. it's 3 o'clock, I'm starting to get drained, let me eat some sugar, and then that's going to push me over the edge until I finish my day, so they're eating some candy, some chocolate, or whatever else they can get their hands on, right? And in reality, the caffeine and the sugar cause the crashes that actually create the lack of energy instead of the building of energy, right? So just understanding how like nutrition and exercise can help you maintain your energy over time and help you actually be more efficient because you're getting more accomplished because you're not emotionally drained in your day. You're not physically drained in your day. And so that's a big part of it. Another piece that can go back even further is realizing how just certain instances and things from childhood on up, any trauma, anything that we've dealt with, and it doesn't have to be like me, I'm not talking like child abuse trauma, although that exists, right? I'm thinking like it can be even minor things like, if you had a sibling that bossed you around or picked on you, or if your family moved around a lot. And those kinds of things too can create this, what I call emotional clutter, right? That then sets us off into having specific behaviors that prevent us from being productive. So sometimes we have to address those things before we're able to move forward and create the positive behavior that we really want to see. And I see that most often in people who, rather than doing the things they know they're supposed to do, will look for another tool, another training, another something that's going to help them feel like they're more prepared, but actually is just distracting them from doing the work they need to be doing.
Gotcha. So this is maybe a leap, but I immediately started thinking of something I did for the first time. I think it was 2.5 years ago. It was a book called Unique Ability. Have you heard this? One of like the Strength Finder type of things, and like basically kind of understanding at a deeper level about yourself. And I know for you, something I believe you believe in is answering the really tough personal questions is what gets you to the right answers. And I think this all ties together. So I'm kind of wondering how would you advise people, what, especially anyone listening to this, if they feel, well, I'm productive, I feel okay. How important do you think it is to still ask yourself the tough questions?
Well, I think if you're happy, right, then you're happy. You're happy, you're content, right? It's the people who are questioning, where am I at? Can I do better? Do I want to do better? Can I accomplish more? What more do I want to accomplish? Or also the people who are beating themselves up all the time internally, telling themselves, you never can come through. You start all these projects, but you never finish them. It's like they're either beating themselves up or they're questioning, right? So two different things, but each of them could be asking themselves questions. And the ones that are beating themselves up, absolutely 100%. You need to be asking the tough questions. Why are you beating yourself up? Why are you saying those things to yourself? And part of, coaching is flipping that script, right? And starting to speak to yourself in a new way, starting to monitor that internal dialogue so that you're giving yourself the permission to make mistakes and recover from them, right? And the same thing, the people who are just asking those questions, they're just being self-aware and saying, you know what, I see myself doing this and I would like to be better at this. And so I would like to try a few things to get myself performing at a higher level, right? And I can tell you, like, I started out as the beating myself up person. And then I moved into the self-aware questioning person, right? And then I moved into the I'm trying and I'm getting better person. And then I moved into this where, like, man, I figured it out. I'm doing all right. I'm pretty happy. Things are good, and to be honest, I was helping people all along the way, and helping other people helped me help myself more at a higher level.
No, I believe it. And two, I know for myself, and I'm sure this is true universally, I'm just, not at the level where I have the understanding of this, but I feel like every time I learn more about myself, then I'm able to help others, at a different level. It's not that I've conquered or I've climbed the mountain. I mean, it's a mountain with no top to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's just been really interesting to see that. So interesting. Okay. Well, then I guess the next question would be, do you have some kind of ideas or how would you guide people in terms of if they want to improve how they're doing on a day-by-day basis, what are some of the things that maybe they could do? Just kind of an open-ended question. I realize
Yeah.
everything plays into this. So
Yeah. No, it definitely does. I think the first thing that you can do is start to look at, where do you feel like you're having an issue, and make a list of those things. And anything that you feel like is something that you'd like to improve on. Like if your car is full of Cheerios, write that down.
yeah,
If you feel like you're the one who's picking up after everybody and always nagging everybody to do what you're doing, write that down. So just write down a list of all the things that you'd like to see different. And then from there, you can take each one and say, what could I do differently? How could I look at this differently? Right? And is there anything I can do to fix this situation? And then try something new, try something different, try creating a new routine, try looking at your time through journaling it, right?
yeah,
Try putting different things into place, and until you find something that works. You will, if you look for it. If you try, you'll find something that works. And the more self-aware you can be and very honest with yourself about where you feel like your failings are, then you'll be able to conquer every single one of them.
yeah.
I'm not saying you won't come up with new ones.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something too that's really good, and you talk about being honest, and I mentioned this too, and I bring this up because I agree, and I've noticed with myself, and that's why I say this, the times when I'm not, or when I gloss over something, that's where the least gains come from. And when I'm honest with myself, that's where it is. The other thing I found with this, and this is more personal for myself, but I think this applies widely, is that writing this stuff down, whether it's on your computer or whether it's pen and paper, but not just thinking like, well, I could do better here, and then maybe I'll fix it. I find that just getting it out of your brain and actually seeing it, and it sounds silly, but maybe it's just solving that 5-minute task that keeps popping up every week. Or maybe it's a deeper thing. But how do you agree, or how do you feel about that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I always write things down, and I prefer to write it down pen and paper. To me, there's a certain amount of tangibility in handwriting something that allows my brain to process it better. That could just be me, but I like the tangibility of pen and paper. So writing something down allows me to process those solutions. Free writing is a great way to do that. There is a great app that I love called Shine. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No, I'm not.
It's a great app, and it's really about, it's there to kind of check in on you and how your day is going. So it'll ask you like, hey, how you feeling today? And there's some little article that they can have you read, or something that starts out with it. That's something motivating. And then it'll say, hey, how you feeling today? And then you can kind of go through, and it will ask you questions. And it will say, oh, you're feeling great. That's wonderful. What are you feeling great about today? And then it will, ask you to kind of talk about what you're grateful for, right? It'll have you make a positive little mantra for yourself at the end, saying, I can, and then write something in, right?
Yeah.
And it's a great little app. And they have a free, the light is on my phone. They have they have a free version, and then they have a premium version. Okay. The premium version, they always have a sale. So wait for the sale. You can get the app for a whole year for like $26.
Oh, cool. Yeah, well, I'm going to check this out. I love doing this. I track a lot on my own. So if nothing else, one person is going to check this out. So if anyone listening, I highly suggest this too. There's a lot of cool things you can do with these. And I like that it starts to kind of guide you. And it's almost like asking why each time. It sounds like not really, but to get a little bit deeper answers out of you. So.
Yeah, and it's just, going through that process of writing down how you're feeling, and then questioning, how could I feel better? How could I do better? When you put that question in front of yourself, whether you're doing it through an app or just writing it down on a piece of paper, that it's the same thing as, when you're talking to a coach. The point of the coach is to ask you the questions that you need to think about, right?
Yeah.
And so all of those things, it's like, it's going down, sitting down, and asking yourself that question so that you can process it, so that you can allow yourself the time and the space to come up with a better solution.
Makes sense. I like it. Well, we just got time for a couple more questions. So this one we've talked about, but I love this. I know people like this. But what tools do you use day to day? What kind of, you've mentioned the Shine app. a couple of books, but do you have any go-to apps, or, do you use certain journals, anything like that?
Yeah, so I do have a journal, just paper journal.
Mm-hmm.
I like a nice embossed cover, something pretty that
I
makes
was
me
gonna
feel
say,
good about
I
writing
used
into
I
it.
used to use just like loose leaf, but then I was like, I like something that looks nice, and if it makes me use it more, then it's fulfilling
Yeah.
the purpose. So
Exactly. I almost feel like when it's a really pretty cover, it gives me a little more purpose in going into it. It feels a little more ritualistic.
okay.
So I'm more likely to do it more often. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Oh,
it
totally.
works.
And I go back to the end, like all I care about, I mean, not really. Okay, not the only thing I care about, but what I want is the results. And if it helps me get that
Absolutely.
result, then I don't care why, unless, so long as it's doing no harm, then great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So definitely a paper journal. I definitely use apps like Shine is my absolute favorite. I have several of them because I like to test them out for
Oh,
clients.
yeah.
But Shine is my favorite. And using Google Calendar for me is huge. And the reason that I choose that one is because I am a total Apple person, and I have a PC, but I
Hmm.
have an iPad and an iPhone. And so for me, I have to use something that works across platforms.
Gotcha.
So Google Calendar works, and I plug in every single part of my day. Acuity, I mentioned, as far as like building my schedule out and having my clients schedule time. We also build out our classes and things like that in our company for our clients in Acuity as well. And what else do I use? I use Trello for, putting together like things that we're going to do when we're working on our business, not in it. So Trello is really important to make sure all the pieces are moving in the right direction. Marketing is being handled, all of that. We use Content Studio for all of our social media marketing and managing that. So it's all like ready to go and scheduled and posts out automatically and all that. We use a Slack channel in our group. We have 12 people right now. So using Slack and being able to have channels for the different divisions of things that we focus on in our company is important. And I use Zoom all the time with all my clients and have our meetings. And then the biggest piece that we use now is Virbela, which is Virbela. And that is where we host our 3D co-working productivity center. So
Okay, so hold on. I want to hear more about this. I've not heard that term before, so I want to know, and I'm sure everyone else would. What is it?
Sure. So it's like a video game. So if you think of a video game and what it's like, you go in there and you've got your person, you make them look kind of like you, right? Or totally not like you,
Yeah.
whatever you want to do, right? And you dress them, and then you're walking around, right? So essentially, this space is the in Verbella is called Open Campus,
Okay.
and it's a place for people to come and connect and communicate, and it's very business focused.
Okay.
So not like The Sims or what's that other one, Second Life.
Second
It's
life.
not like that. Yeah, it's not like that. It's definitely more cartoony, like The Sims. More so than Second Life, but it's designed to be used for business. And so we actually have a private space that we pay for. It looks like an office floor.
Mm-hmm.
So we can click a button, go into our office floor, and we have 36 private offices and 2 meeting rooms and 2 boardrooms. And it gives us all the space to be able to connect. And so part of what we do is we have a membership that is all about, like, hey, you've taken like 50 million different programs on how to build your business. Now it's time to actually do it, right?
Yeah.
And so people can come into this space and co-work with 6 different coaches and work in that space and be able to sit down and take classes or workshops or, get work done on their business instead of just in it. And then for all the support things that they need in between, like a copywriter and a logo designer and a branding specialist or virtual assistants or a video editor, like we have all those people in that space as well. So they can just walk around the corner and pop into the video editor's office and say, hey, can you stitch these 2 videos together for me and cut the ends off? And he's like, yeah, sure. And then he does it for them.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, so it's kind of like a video game for office people.
That is crazy, in a good way. I was like, yeah, I had never heard of this. Like, what is going on over there? All right, something else to check out. So, last question. I really love the answers from this, but what book or any type of media piece do you find yourself recommending to people the most recently or nowadays?
Ooh, there are so many books. So if you look, I know that this is a podcast, but on either side of me, I have huge bookcases filled with books. And I am constantly recommending books. My favorite right now that I recommend a lot is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. I love that one. It's an awesome book, specifically because he talks about hitting upper limits, which is very much about like when you start to get successful, something like really amazing happens, and then somehow you like self-sabotage your way back into the place you were before. And he talks about why that happens and how to remove yourself from that situation and not be stopped by an upper limit, but to see the infinite potential that's in front of you.
Interesting.
It's
all right.
Cool.
I was about to say, that sounds good. I'd like to check that out. I'm sure other people would. And I commend you on sticking to one. You are one of the few, and I generally allow several because I don't think I could even just stick to one. So. Oh,
I have a ton, but you asked for one, so I gave you one. I followed your instructions.
Thank you. Angie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I know I've gotten a lot out of this. I'm sure everyone else has that's going to listen to this now and in the future. So thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate you and all that you do and the information that you're spreading. That's great.
Well, thank you. Where can people go to find out more about you and what you're working on?
Yeah, easy peasy. Productivesouls.org.
Boom. All right. Anything else you want to share with people, or is that where they
you know what? When they go to the website, right up at the top, there is a 5-day productivity challenge, and there's a different video that they'll get every day for 5 days. And we talk all about all kinds of how to go from being chaos and crazy and all over the place to really finally feeling like you have it all together. And we talk about the why. We talk about those hard questions and the deep questions and where it all comes from and how to connect the dots.
Outstanding. Well, then go check it out, grab it, and that's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that. Thanks, Angie.
You are so welcome. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Real World Productivity Podcast. If you know someone that would enjoy this episode, please grab the link and send it via email, message, or whatever means works best. Now, if you're looking for more ways to increase your productivity, time management, and team building skills, be sure to go to productivity.academy/resources to find out what tools, cheat sheets, and services can get you started and make the most impact right now. For those who want to make fast changes and want to save dozens of hours, I highly recommend joining the 14-day Productivity Foundation Challenge at productivity.academy/foundation challenge. This 14-day challenge takes minutes per day, but will help you develop or improve your daily review to get more done with less distractions and loss of focus. You'll also get over-the-shoulder directions for setting up an automation to save dozens of hours and the process for deciding what else you should automate and how to do it. And if you're serious about continuous improvement and you know that productivity, time management, and team building will impact every area of your personal and professional life, join us in the Growth Automation membership. Find out more at productivity.academy/join.